Three, two, one, here we go. Hello everyone, I'm Brian the Rain Man Lucas. Welcome to Rain Man's Take, observations on the world we live in. We're going to take a deeper dive into topics of interest to me, including politics, current events, history, popular culture, and social issues. You'll find the diversity of topics refreshing. In our clickbait, soundbite society, we rarely get the whole story. Rain Man's Take interviews interesting people as well as peeling back the onion on specific topics, all with the goal of getting people to think more deeply about a subject. Hey everybody, it's the Rain Man. Want to introduce my guest today, Lance Cummings. Lance, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. So I was introduced to Lance by Julie Thunder when I did my interview with Julie, who's running for mayor of Encinitas. At the end of our conversation, she recommended I talk to Lance. That he would be an amazing interview. And once I reached out to you and you agreed to do this, I started doing some background research, and yeah, you're going to be a very interesting interview. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. So Lance is a retired Navy SEAL, and he's also the founder of the Epic Charity Challenge Foundation. And we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk about some of the other things that Lance is doing for veterans, and then also kind of get into some of our thoughts about the current status of the military and where we see it going from here. So, Lance, thanks again for joining me. Why don't we go ahead and do this? Why don't you start off by kind of giving us a little bit of your background, your military experience, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, that's a tricky question. The older I get, the longer that takes. Yeah, easy. But I grew up in Georgia and entered the Navy, and at age 22, I knew I wanted to be a SEAL, but they had actually a rule at that time where you had to do a year in the fleet first. So I put in my time, learned how to play the game, put in my package, came to Coronado, went through SEAL training, and from 1983 to 1995 with active duty on the West Coast and the East Coast, SEAL Team 3, SEAL Team 4. I actually got off of active duty, went to chiropractic school at Life University in Atlanta as a reservist. So I had a practice, and then opened that up in August of 2000, and 9/11 hit, of course, and 2 months after that, I was in Afghanistan for about the next year. And then I just knew I had more to offer and more to do to get my jihad on. So I came back to the States, continued with active duty, and I contracted with Blackwater for 3 years and moved back out to San Diego and remained active duty from that period on, continuing practicing chiropractic. I moved into the athletes and animal spectrum of it, so it's a little bit of a niche, I understand, but I was able to morph both of those occupations into keeping guys healthy while I was in active duty, and then trying to keep them in the game, basically. Retired in 2011. And then I rolled into training guys for the next generation of guys in a couple of different aspects, as a coach, as a mentor. And then I rolled into Epic Charity Challenge, created that in 2016. And here we are in 2020. I've done one each year since 2017, and just trying to raise money for different charities.
That's great. Real quick before we get into that, I did 2 tours in Iraq in 04 and 05. Were you over there at that time?
I was in Iraq in 04, 05, 07, 09, in between trips to Afghanistan. So I guess I did 7 pumps in the sandbox and all.
Yeah, the soft guys have been extremely busy over the last 2 decades in that part of the world. So jumping into the Epic Charity Challenge, what made you decide to start that up?
You know, I got off of active duty and there was a big void there for me. And I started looking around and kind of doing a self-analysis and I asked myself, what do I like to do? Well, I love to travel. I like doing things that benefit other people. I like doing hard shit that just, it's on the other side of uncomfortable. And how do I do all those things and maybe bring a few friends along with me? And the first event that I actually came up with was I had just seen the movie 300 recently, and I thought about, well, they marched from Sparta to Thermopylae, 300 guys, and I thought about, let's see, how far is that? I looked at a map, and I said, well, I can go over there and recreate that trip. So I got 17 other people to join me, and we raised about $150,000 for the Navy SEAL Foundation. In 8 days, we covered 260 miles, and it was an epic trip, and everyone every day was, we were walking through essentially the same countryside that the 300 did, and you'd be surprised how little it's changed in 2,500 years. But just going and seeing and walking down in those valleys and knowing that 200,000 Persians and Athenians and Greeks met on that battlefield right down there that's below us, and there's just an aura, and you could feel it when you're walking on those grounds, just like Gettysburg or anywhere else.
Yeah.
And men fought and died right there for what was important to them. And that trip right there just kind of lit a fire, and that I got an idea for the next year. And then while I was on the next year's trip, I got an idea for the following year. And I've got a bunch of repeat offenders, people who they sign up before they even know what the next event is. And we go all over the world doing crazy stuff.
The first 17 guys, were they just all a bunch of old SEAL buddies, or were they kind of across the board?
You know what? It was a really diverse group. I had some SEALs in there. I had another guy, Kyle Maynard, who was born with no arms and no legs. We had him on a bicycle, an adaptive bicycle. And I had another buddy, Faris Amra, who's lost his leg in an IED. And having those guys on there with us, it turns it into a no bitching trip, because who's going to come up and tell you their knee hurts or their leg hurts or their feet hurt? I'll just tell them to go talk to Kyle over there and tell him how bad your feet hurt. And he's got no feet. So it was really inspiring having those guys with us, as well as if you're going 30 miles a day for 8 days, you really have to dig down sometimes, because I'd be walking with my buddy Ferris, and he'd stop, take out his running blade out of his backpack, and take his boot off of his prosthetic, and we're 25 miles into a 30-mile day, and he's about to take off on a run. Well, he's damn sure not going to leave me there on the side of the road, so I'm going to run with him. And it's just inspiring, just little things like that happen on a daily basis. You look back on them and, you laugh, but you can build on that. That just sets a foundation for you when the next time stuff gets hard for you. You look back on what you've already done and go, well, this is nothing. I can take care of that. Easy.
No, that's incredible. What going back to Thermopylae, what does that look like? Is it that cliff with the looming cliffs around it, or is it more of a kind of a valley with a kind of a choke point?
Yeah, it is a big valley with a choke point, and the amazing thing is, because it's there at a river head, at the head of a river, it's now probably a half mile inland from where it used to be, right on the coast. All the sediment has washed out there, but the hot springs at Thermopylae are still there. There's actually a museum that's built right there on the site, the battlefield, and where the 300 made their last stand is still there. So they've done a really, really cool job of preserving that. The really ironic thing, and it was unbelievable, was there was a Syrian refugee camp right there at the gates of Thermopylae. and there were probably 300 or 400 Syrian refugees camped out there that had come over on boats, and the Greeks were, had put them up in a camp there. So it's like 2,500 years later, the Trojan horse is still there, and there's still groups beating on the door, and I'm sure they continue to want to embed their culture into the Greek culture, but it is what it is. The Greeks are just so humanitarian, and they know what it's like to be oppressed. So they take on other cultures, and I think there was a lot to do with the European bank as well, because the Greeks owed the European banking industry a lot of money.
Yep.
And my take was that the European banking industry forgave a lot of their debt by them holding the Syrians there, letting them camp out there, letting them stay there, so they didn't overflow the rest of Europe.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it sucks to be in debt, especially to the World Bank.
Yeah. Well, you'd be surprised what people do once they, when they owe money or anything else.
They can start turning the screws on you. So that first one that you did, how much of a lead time did you give those 17 guys that participated?
Yeah, we had a pretty good lead time. Like I generated it in, I think, October, November, and we actually did the trip in early May.
Okay.
But I had guys who didn't sign up until a week before. So
Really?
I had one guy came over from Salt Lake City, Dallin Rogers. He's a stud athlete. He really didn't know what he was getting into. But to his credit, he made the entire trip, every step of the way, with shin splints that turned into stress fractures, that turned into, he was barely walking at the last day, but by George, he was walking, and mentally, the guy was tough as nails. And then some other people who came over and thought they were prepared for it really didn't do the homework. So I had put out a full training regimen, weekly and monthly mileage and goals and things to ensure people got there and were prepared, but it was up to the individual to adhere to that.
Right.
And, I learned a lot from that for additional or for follow-on charity challenges to make sure, or try to make sure people were as ready as possible.
Yeah.
But even though we were training for 6 months at a time, prior to that, I said a couple of guys they came in at the last minute and bought off on it and then ended up doing it and did well.
Yeah. And now, is this your full-time gig right now, or are you still doing the chiropractic stuff? Because it sounds like it's getting popular, and I have to imagine there's a ton of logistics involved.
There is a lot of logistics, and it's not a full-time gig. I try to put as much as I can onto a couple of other people's plates, but I'm still responsible for getting people over there, and I feel personally responsible for making sure that we conduct a very safe event and no one gets injured, no one dies, and I'll call it a win if that happens. We raise enough money, and so far so good. I'll just knock on wood there.
Nice. And before we get going any further, if people are interested in learning more about it, what's the website?
I've got a website. It's epiccharitychallenge.com, all one word. And you can go on that website, look at videos from our previous events. I've taken a videographer on almost every one of the events. So we get some really good footage for people to use on their, because we set up a social media donation site for every person who wants to come in, and they can reach out to their network, let them know what they're doing. And for accountability purposes, I find that really helps, because other people are going to ask you, how's your training going for that event? And what are you doing for it? And that helps keep you on track on your training. But it also helps you raise $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 via your social media. And when you're on the event, you can live stream through your social media webpage, and people see that stuff going on live, and they're more apt to reach out and say, well, that sounds good. Thanks for your support. Here's my $25, and it all adds up. So I try to set a minimum for each one of the events, So each person's going to come in with $2,000 or $3,000, and they need to make that minimum before a month after the event. So I give them a lot of leeway time for that as well. We just wrapped up in September at the Grand Canyon doing a rim to rim to rim. That was September 18th and 19th, and then I closed the web page off for donations on October 15th. So it gave them a lot of time to raise the minimum amount.
And how much did you end up raising for the rim to rim?
Well, we did $50,000 for the Navy SEAL Museum, which, you know, I think the whole thing from concept to execution was about 6 weeks. So it was, I realized the Grand Canyon was open, you know, I had Iwo Jima planned for March. That didn't happen. So I wanted to do something this year, not just postpone it. So I realized the Grand Canyon was open. It was there. It's in our backyard. You know, it's not, and everyone can make it there.
Yeah.
And I just put the logistics together and did it.
Nice. And then after the fundraising goal for each participant, I assume they're all responsible for getting themselves over there. And then once they're there, I would assume you probably have stuff set up in terms of hotels, or are you guys camping out on the side of the road type of thing?
No, it's you know, life sucks enough when your event is going to suck hard. You just want to try to make it as least as possible. But once the participants get to the site, whether it be the Philippines or Normandy, then I take care of everything else. So the logistics in country, everything from transportation to food to lodging and everything is taken care of, because I want to be responsible for that. And that's the only way that I can ensure that things are taken care of, is if I set it up and I know I've got one vendor or one hotel or something, then to me, in my mind, that just clarifies everything and it makes it easier on me. And people, all they have to do is show up, get to the right place at the right time with the right uniform and the positive frame of mind, and you know, we take it from there.
I love it. So Expedition 1 was 17 people. What's the max you've had over the last couple of years?
We took 31 people to Normandy. So we did a recreation of D-Day on June 6, 2018. And our footprint with family and everything else was about 110 people. Wow. But I had 31 participants, and we took French Coast Guard, 3 French Coast Guard cutters out 7 miles into the English Channel. They dropped us off. The people who couldn't swim or didn't feel comfortable swimming 7 miles in, I had them on a rubber boat. So I try to scale as much as possible so as many people can participate. Yep. That maybe it's not a strong point for them, and I wouldn't feel really comfortable putting someone who didn't feel comfortable into the English Channel 7 miles away from the shore. So I put them in a rubber boat and they paddled, and the French Coast Guard dropped us off 7 miles out. What I didn't calculate was there was going to be a storm that day that was almost exactly like D-Day 1944. Really? So we had 8 to 10 foot seas and 35 to 40 knot winds. And the Coast Guard didn't want to go out. They didn't want to take us out. Yeah. It took a little persuasion with the Coast Guard by waving a napkin around and saying, "Oh, you're telling me this is the French battle flag?" You know, and they took offense to that, which was pretty much what that was my objective. So they took us out, dropped us off. We swam onto Omaha Beach on June 5th, which is the day before D-Day. Swam onto Omaha Beach, and the next day we gathered 50 pounds of sand apiece. We had a really nice, beautiful morning ceremony at the battlefield on Omaha Beach and the cemetery. Everyone went down and grabbed 50 pounds of sand, put it in a rucksack, and then we humped it 25 miles into the village of St. Lo, where there was another ceremony on D-Day, June 6th, for the French freedom fighters who died in the prison in St. Lo. They got bombed by the Allies, and it was just a really cool time, to walk those roads. the hedgerows, and if you had done your research and you read about the battles, and you knew that, you could be a squad or a company of American soldiers walking down those hedgerows, and they're so thick that you could be 10 feet away from a German regiment that's on the other side of the hedges, and you'd never know it. And you could see how one or two snipers could hold up a whole company of Allied forces just by being in the right place and sniping them, because there was really no way to flank them. Those roads are buried down 10 feet below the fields that are on the sides of them, and those hedges are 10 feet thick. So you never, you can read about it, but you don't have an appreciation for the terrain and the 1,000 yards of beach tide that those guys fought through once they landed to get to the beachhead. You just don't have an appreciation of 1,000 yards of beach under fire.
All sorts of obstacles all over.
With overlapping fields of fire from the Germans. It's really interesting. One of the participants that was on that Normandy event was from East Germany. One of the first guys that signed up, super guy. He gave me a book called WN62, written by a German soldier who was a machine gunner on Omaha Beach.
No way.
He was there from 0600 in the morning until 1500 in the afternoon, when they basically pulled their position and retreated off of the beachhead. But reading that book, WN62, from his perspective, it was a very hard read, because you knew he was talking about killing U.S. and Allied soldiers, or U.S. soldiers on Omaha Beach. And he basically estimated that he had one machine gun, 3 barrels, estimated that he went through almost 25,000 rounds that one morning for 9 hours, and killed over 12,000 U.S. soldiers. One man, one machine gun, one beach. It's amazing.
It's mind blowing.
Yeah, and then when you're on that property, when you're on that beach, it's emotionally very taxing for you, especially if you're a patriot and you know who died, and you take that sand and it's got DNA of patriots that died on that beach right there. I still have some. I brought that sand home with me, but being on those locations there's nothing like it. You can't duplicate that anywhere. And the fact that we did it, and we were raising money for a charitable cause, just made it that much better, because we knew it was hard. What we were going to do was hard, but we're exponentially increasing other people's participation and chances, and to do things that they may not get to do. So the Navy SEAL Museum could take that money and turn it into scholarships and turn it into veterans assistance. And so every step you're taking along the way, you're helping someone else, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people. And that just makes it that much better.
That's amazing. And just for anybody out there who's listening right now, if you want to get a kind of an appreciation for what Lance is talking about, the first 15 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, and then the series of Band of Brothers, they go into it. Those are all great examples of what he's talking about, the hedgerows and just the terrain coming off the beach into the countryside of France. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't the Allies basically level Saint-Lô? All that was left was like a church steeple or something like that, wasn't it? Or am I thinking about another town?
Yeah, Saint-Lô was bombed. I mean, you can look at it now, and it's got a lot of the walls and stuff that were built by Romans were bombed by the Allies. It was decimated. But the reason we picked Saint-Lô was because that was supposed to be D-Day plus 24 hours, D-Day plus 1. The Allied forces were supposed to be there. They landed on June 6th. They didn't arrive in Saint-Lô until July 16th.
Wow.
That was how far behind the intelligence timeline that they actually were, and how tough the opposition was going into France. So that gives you a really good appreciation. And coming off of 6 to 8 foot seas in the English Channel, and you think about all the Army infantry people who were bobbing out in Higgins boats and flat bottom boats in the English Channel for 6 hours, you know, waiting for dawn, waiting for the landing to happen. You know, some of those boys had never seen ocean or open water or anything else. So, you know, for everything that I've read said that only thing they wanted was to get off the boat. They didn't care what was there when the ramp went down, as long as they were on firm water. And the attrition rate for some of the units that rolled into Omaha Beach and Utah Beach was just, it was astronomical, like 70% for some of the units there, just on D+1.
Yeah, just as an aside, my wife and I vacationed in France, I think 4 or 5 years ago, and we actually flew from London to Nice, and we flew over the Normandy coast on June 6th. And I just remember tapping her on the shoulder and looking down and saying, this is exactly what our airmen would have been looking at bombing over over Normandy. And then we went to Normandy and climbing around Pointe de Hoc, climbing through all the bomb craters. I mean, it's just, it gives you goosebumps when you think about stuff like that.
You're absolutely correct, you know, and, you know, those guys, the greatest generation, basically were drafted. They signed an enlistment. Their enlistment was until the war is terminated. They had no idea if it was going to be 2 years, 10 years. They had no idea. They just knew that they were going to be fighting. They were taking the fight to the enemy until it was over. Yeah. And the guys in Europe were studs, you know, but at least the Germans had enough sense to surrender. The guys in the Pacific knew they were going to have to kill every Jap soldier over there before they took that island. So it was a completely different war.
Yeah, yeah. And kind of you being a SEAL, and I don't remember if they were English or if they were American, but there was a lot of activity along the coastline leading up to the invasion, wasn't there, in terms of reconnaissance along those beachheads by guys out, basically the precursors to the SEALs?
There were a lot of rehearsals going on in England, and actually a couple of botched rehearsals that you don't ever read about, where a lot of people died along the way. But yeah, there was, you know, some feints of the Allied forces trying to decipher where the best beachhead was. I think they knew at the point they were Omaha Beach, but they didn't want to let the Germans know. So there was a lot of different tactics that were going on for deception along the way. And if you read it, you know, read the history of World War II and Germany, and then go to those battlegrounds. There's so much over there. And from my perspective, you know, especially the French people in Normandy, being over there on D-Day, you look up and you see they're flying British flags, they're flying U.S. flags, and they'll do that. They are patriotic, you know, to a fault. The people who are the caretakers for the U.S. cemetery on Omaha Beach are 3rd and 4th generation French people who have just passed that job down to their children and children's children. And they do that with no pay. They're volunteers, and they do it with a passion. So they don't forget, you know, that they would be living under tyranny right now if it weren't for the consortium of other countries that came to their aid.
Yep. The actual physical event that you guys did, how many guys actually made that 7-mile swim?
I put 17 people on the beach out of 27 that went in. You know, all the Coast Guard guys got seasick on the way out. Every one of them, almost everyone got really seasick. My wife is an emergency physician, and I had her on one of the boats, and she was passing out Dramamine like it was candy. And because of the tidal difference, there's about a 35-foot range of tide. The Coast Guard boats could not go back into their marina until high tide. So there was a 6-hour, they couldn't just go out, drop us off, and then escort us back in. They had to stay outside the marina there for another 6 hours in deep water. So it was definitely challenging and fulfilling, but everyone said it gave them a real sense of appreciation for 1944.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that actually, that particular trip, Julie, when she told me about you, she told me about the that D-Day trip, and that immediately piqued my my interest. So that is just fascinating. What now, are you doing all of the coordination? I mean, or is the State Department involved because you're dealing with the French government at this point? I mean, or is it just you calling up the U.S. consulate and saying, you know, this is what I'm planning on doing. What do I need to do?
That's pretty much it.
Really?
I pick up the phone, and it's amazing how when you do good things happen to you. Because I was telling my wife about this. This is what I want to do next year, and she said, "Well, my cousin used to be in the French Coast Guard, and so I called her cousin up, and now he's a civilian at the upper echelon for the French Coast Guard." So I told him about what I was planning, and he said, well, how about 3 40-foot cutters? Would that do for you? I was like, well, yeah, I think we can run with that. So he basically put that together. I contacted some of the, I think it was Avon, whose small boats that we use in training for the SEAL teams. And they actually had a rep who was over there who said that they would send a boat down for us. And my neighbor had a good friends who ran an Airbnb in Normandy. So I called them up, and, you know, things just, they work out the way that they should. And it's amazing because I think when you do good things like that and you're trying to help, other people want to help out as well. So yeah, it's a one-man band, but it seems to work.
That's awesome. And again, everybody out there, it's epiccharitychallenge.com if you're interested. What I know that you wanted to do Iwo Jima this year. That got canceled because of COVID. Then you did the Rim to Rim in the Grand Canyon. What's next up?
Next year is we're rolling into Iceland, and we're going to do the Ring Road, which is the road that goes around the perimeter of Iceland. It's 860 miles. We're going to do it on bicycle in 8 days. And it's not an iconic battleground, but I don't think you can go anywhere in this entire world where you'll see the terrain and the topography and the diverse amount of ecological things that you will see anywhere in one country. And so we stopped in Iceland 2 years ago on the way back from Normandy, and I took my kids there. My twins are 13. We stayed for a week, and we saw about a third of what we wanted to see.
Yeah.
So I said, oh, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to take a bunch of people with, and we're going to do something that's, you know, maybe a little bit difficult, but not too bad if you train for it. Yeah. And let's just use it as an Epic Charity Challenge. So I've got a bunch of people, crazy people who are signed up now. I limit it to 20 people because that's a manageable number for me. You know, if I had 50, it would just be, I like to participate and do the event itself. And if I had 50 people, there would be just no way. Yeah. So I'll be one of the participants. I try to not to ever ask anyone to do anything that I personally wouldn't do myself. So I'd like to have something like that on my radar, that it wakes me up in the morning and I know what I've got to do. I know what I've got to train for. And so that's next year is Iceland Ring Road.
And when is that going down?
It'll be summer solstice, June 16th through the 26th. So summer solstice, I think, is on the 20th. We'll be riding in 24 hours of daylight. So, it'll be plenty of time, but the weather there can go from, hero to zero in no amount of time. There's really no trees on the island to get behind. So you could have a 40-mile-an-hour wind. It could be 70 degrees and you're cruising with a tailwind, or it could be, raining sideways and it's 35 degrees and you've got a side wind about to blow you off the road. It's just, you have to be prepared for anything mentally and physically. And that's what's, one of the cool things about it is you just don't know what to expect. And you probably will not be surprised at what you get.
Yeah. How many people do you have signed up so far out of the 20?
I've got 20 people who have
Oh,
thrown
you
in.
okay? You already have
Yeah.
full complement. Okay.
But people say they want to do things, but it's the people that have been with me for 3 or 4 years or 5 years who I rely on.
Yeah.
Once I open up registration and someone goes in and there's a registration fee and they put their money down, then they made a commitment. I'll generally have people do training camps. So I'll have you as a participant, I'll have you send in a GPS for a 40-mile ride or a 50 or a 60-mile ride. Everyone sends in GPSs, so I know people are putting in their homework. I know people are going to show up with a game face on and ready to go.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. That's amazing. So you got 20 people. You fundraise that they got their minimums out there. What other, and you had mentioned the Navy SEAL Museum. What are some of the other charities that you guys raise money for? And how do you pick those?
Right. So, well, I like to look at charities that put the most amount of their money into the operations and the things that they say that they're doing. Navy SEAL Museums, like 97 cents out of every dollar goes into the charity, the Trident House Foundation. So it goes into the scholarship, goes into veterans assistance with K9s. Navy SEAL Foundation was one of the first, so it's a very good organization. We went to the Philippines 2 years ago and Bataan Death March, and that was for the National Ability Center, which is located in Park City. I had been to Park City skiing, and I saw the National Ability Center there, the trailer. I start talking to people. My son actually has lymphedema, so he was a participant in some of their events, and I just got to know him. And I looked at the charity, great people, and they do a huge amount of things recreationally for people who are challenged mentally and physically or emotionally. They don't turn people away. And I thought, well, I'd like to be able to write them a check for $100,000. Financially, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I'm not in a position to, but I can organize an event. I can get people going and doing something, and I can lead 20 people to do something, and we can collaboratively raise that money for this charity and make an impact. And that's what I did. So I choose those charities by what they do and if they do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I sent you an email a couple of days ago, and you're kind of swimming in this same pond in terms of PTSD and TPI and all of these other combat related issues. But have you heard of the sheltertosoldier.org?
I've heard of them, yes. I haven't gone into and done any in-depth research on it. What do you know about it, or is that something that we should look at?
Well, I would highly recommend it. I actually interviewed Graham Bloom, who's the owner, the founder, about 2 months ago, and I'm scheduled to do a longer podcast interview with him in a couple of weeks. Where he's going to bring in one of his clients and their pet. But what they do is and we're dog lovers, my wife and I. And what he does, Graham's a professional dog trainer. He's been doing it for 20 years. And what he does is he goes into shelters, adopts a dog, trains them for a year to be emotional support dogs, and then pairs them up with a vet who's suffering from PTSD or traumatic brain injury or whatever the case may be. And it is just an awesome thing. So it sounds almost exactly like the types of stuff that probably would be right in your wheelhouse. And I think it's a great organization, but that's really cool that you're doing that, because it's amazing, because a lot of these things, people don't even realize that guys like you are out there doing these amazing type of events. So I'm really glad that Julie introduced me to it, because this is great stuff, and I think a lot more people need to hear about it.
Well, thanks. I suppose we kind of fly under the radar right now, but there's not a huge push for advertising or anything. But every year we seem to get enough people to raise enough money to have a positive impact on a specific charity.
Yeah.
That's all good. You know, if we leave the world a better place than it was when we got here, then I call that a win.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. What, how do you pick where you're going to go? I mean, obviously Iceland, you were there for a week and you fell in love with it. You thought it'd be a cool event, but
Right.
how else what are some of your criteria?
A lot of it is from reading, you know, history. I'm a history buff, so I like to look at battles and wars and adversity and how units or individuals fought through the adversity. Obviously, the Bataan Death March was something that I think it's been swept under the rug by governments, by history classes, because of the brutality of it, for one thing, but it's something that we should never forget. And I've been to the Philippines, deployed there numerous times, but when you start reading about how after a 3-month siege, these soldiers were taken prisoner and had been on less than 1,000 calories a day for weeks and weeks and weeks, fighting every day, and how they were marched 60 miles to the rail station and then put on rail cars and tracked another 40 miles to a POW camp. Walking those miles, you know, I try to embed my event into something that could be currently going on for a couple of different reasons. A, logistically, it makes it a little bit easier. And B, is because I'd like to incorporate some of the host nation people as much as possible into the event. So the Philippines have an event called the Freedom March, and it basically is the Bataan Death March. It starts in Bataan, the peninsula, and then it goes all the way to Camp Donnelly, which is the POW camp. It's a 100-mile relay. The military units do it. The police academy does it.
Yeah.
But when I looked at them and, you know, I told them, I reached out to them. I said, you know, I'd like to do this event with you. And they said, sure, come on. I said, well, we're going to do it. We're going to do it solo. So everyone's going to do the event. And they we went back and forth, and I didn't think they really grasped what I was trying to say was we're not doing it as a relay. Everyone's going to do every mile, every step of the way. But it was really humbling to walk those miles. And I even met some survivors from the Philippines who were survivors of the Bataan Death March, who, I mean, the U.S. soldiers had it bad, but the Philippine soldiers had it twice as bad because the Japanese just had no respect whatsoever for their culture. They weren't there to nation build. They were there just to rob and rape and pillage everything they could out of that country. So they cared nothing about the Philippine soldiers or the population. But I met some of the survivors from that Philippine Death March, and, you know, just talking to them and being in the same room and shaking their hand is it's life-changing. It really is. So just setting yourself up to be in that place at that time and remembering what happened there is huge in my book. And in doing it for a good cause just makes it that much better.
Yeah, and the Japanese in the 30s and 40s didn't really care much about any of those countries in and around Southeast Asia.
Yeah, the Bushido culture was just anything that is not Japan is the enemy.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a lot of reading and research into that culture, into those times that you're talking about, the 20s and 30s and 40s, building up to that, where you could see a war was imminent, and you can't be ignorant of that. And if you don't look at history, you're bound to relive it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a huge point in the United States, not letting its guard down anywhere. You know, and we start pulling our special operations forces in from other countries, we're losing the pulse of those countries when we do that. So I think it behooves us to always have our forces out there because if we pull out, somebody's going to fill that void. China, Russia, some other country who is trying to maintain or get a foothold in that country is going to get that pulse. And we lose that awareness, we lose that intelligence gathering capability. It's just something that we need to maintain. And I think SOF in itself gives us, it's a force multiplier, so it gives us the ability to do that with a small unit instead of having 1,000 or 10,000 soldiers there. We can do it affordably and in a very small footprint, I think.
Yeah, and he's Special Operations Forces is what he's talking about, SOF. So and I mean, I'm sure you still have guys that are that you can tap into on active duty to kind of get the pulse of what's going on out there. But are we pulling guys out? Or I know that obviously the big headline type countries, Afghanistan, Iraq, we're wanting to come out of there. But all the other places around, I mean, what's your sense of that? Is America retracting back to a point where it's not prudent in your mind, or?
Well, I think we're training our special operations forces to, you're not emulating what the big Army can do or the big Navy or the big Air Force can do, but you're doing it much more efficiently with a smaller footprint and working within the State Department rules of engagement, which are somewhat difficult at times.
Yeah.
It's a different mission for special operations forces, and a lot of the guys who come in, they want to kick doors down and they want to go direct action. And when the mission changes and now you're doing foreign internal defense and you're training other countries, it's not as sexy, of course, as doing the direct action mission. So it's harder to keep the quality of the individuals in the forces because that's not what they really signed up for. Yeah. And it takes a little bit more of a mature soldier or sailor or airman to grasp where you're going or what you're doing with that mission. And so I think a lot of it depends on the leadership. You know, the leadership has to ensure that the soldiers know what that mission is, and they go into it with the rules of engagement that allow them to come home, but to continue to contribute to what our nation's mission is overseas.
And kind of on that point, and specifically with the SEALs, I mean, are they having any problem getting recruits coming in, or are they still as popular as ever?
We have currently got, COVID really backed up the whole training pipeline, as it did with every force, military force. But we're currently still running full classes through, given the restrictions that we have to train under. And, we've got a good number of people. Thankfully, we haven't revised our numbers whatsoever. So we're not on a set number. So there's no requirement to make 200 SEALs a year. If we have a net loss of 5 SEALs or a net gain of 100, it doesn't impact the training whatsoever. So we don't alter the standards to alter the numbers. And that's a great thing, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you can kind of almost relay that over to your to the epic challenges. You don't want to dilute it to the point where the really hardcore people that want that challenge are not going to be challenged just to get your number.
Absolutely. Right. And I try to put people in ability groups too. So if I've got 3 guys who are crushing all their swims, I'm going to put those 3 guys together on the Normandy swim. Or if I've got guys, say in the Grand Canyon, who want to run the entire 45 miles to the North Rim and back, and I'm not going to hold them back. I'm going to put them in a group where they'll have accountability to other people and the safety factor is high. But I want them to be just as challenged as the person who can only ruck 3 miles an hour, with 25 pounds, but they've got to make the minimum standards, and that's what it's all about. The whole thing about everyone being a winner and everyone getting a first place award it doesn't fly with me. I'm sorry, I just can't accept that.
I happen to feel the same way. So, And that actually kind of brings us right into my next question I wanted to ask you about, and that was the SOF, the Special Operation Forces Academy. Now, do you run that, or are you just kind of part of that?
No, I actually run that at the Olympic Training Center here in San Diego.
And then talk a little, because it's at least reading, because I here in Encinitas, I live 1 mile from downtown Encinitas, and they used to have the SEAL Fit CrossFit box right downtown, and every once in a while you'd see the guys out on the beach, by Swamis, the kids running around with white t-shirts and a telephone pole. Is that what you're doing? I mean, that's part of the program, right? Is to help the guys get ready for SEAL team training, right?
It is, exactly. And I ran the SEAL Fit program for 6 years as the operations guy there. What I morphed that into with the SOF operation, SOF Academy, SOF Prep Academy, is it is not a beatdown. It's more of an educational process. So, yeah, I want you to come in and bring your A game, but I'm going to do a complete assessment for physical training, swimming, open water swimming. I'm going to give you all the tools that you need, as well as an assessment, tell you what your weak points and strong points are, and then tell you how to improve those. So if you're in the pipeline and you're going into Marine Recon or you're going into SEAL training 6 months from now, or you're already in there and you have a ship date that's 3 months away, but you feel like you've got some weak areas you need to train on, I'm going to give you the tools to go home and continue to train so that those are no longer your weak points, they become your strong points.
Yeah.
So
go ahead, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I've got a cadre of other retired SEALs and active duty and contractor guys who you can't find this anywhere else in the world, where you're going into their training pipeline and we're going to look at you 6 months out and we're going to tell you how to succeed. And the biggest part of it is the mental preparation, because I'll make it tough, and you can make it so tough that anyone's going to quit. But you need to find out where that fine point is, and you need to keep pushing that point further and further and further down the track. So you can take more, you can endure more, you can have to eat more until you reach that point. And then when you finally reach that point, you look around and you see other people that are suffering just as bad as you are, then that's the point where I'm going to put you into a leadership position right when you're about to quit. And I'm going to say, take this group and swim them across the lake and make sure everyone gets there safely. So, I guess it's a skill that you learn over a given point of time, running evolutions of when someone has almost had enough and when you need to change gears as far as what they're doing. So, yeah, I think I've had a really good success rate for guys going into the pipeline and completing it that may not have completed it, or they may not have done their best.
Yeah.
But I had one particular successful candidate was about to go into the Air Force Academy, went through my SOF Prep Academy, pulled his papers, and went to Naval Academy the same year. Yeah, so he's now in the Naval Academy.
There you go. You gotta love it. That's great. Yeah, that was one thing and I assume you guys are all pretty tight-lipped in terms of the group, but you always see, right now, SEALs, it's, there's a lot of real popular guys out there that are former SEALs. Jocko Willink is one, Goggins is another, Dan Crenshaw, the congressman. It seems like they're all doing all these really cool stuff. You guys all kind of talk. I mean, could you call up Jocko and invite him over down to the SOF Academy, or how does all that work out?
Well, if I'm now currently working for the Navy SEAL Museum as a capital campaign director, because
all the time.
We're going to build a Navy SEAL museum right here in San Diego. So if an event occurred and we need to do a gala or something like that, yeah, I could reach out to Jocko and say, hey, how about coming and do a speech for us? You can contribute your speaking fee back to the fund, but we need to do something that's kind of out of the box. And yeah, I think he would come. If it fit into his calendar. I don't know Dan Crenshaw personally, but it wouldn't be hard. I know someone who knows Dan Crenshaw. So it's fairly easy. It's a small community.
Yeah.
And yeah, your reputation goes a long way.
Yeah. My personal opinion, I'd love to see him run in 2024. That guy just makes sense. I mean, I follow him, and he just makes sense to me.
Well, if you read his book, Fortitude, you know, everything in there is common sense stuff. And you see so many people protesting because all they know is what's on the surface. They skim the surface and they think they know the issue. And Dan brings up some really, really good points in his book, is that you have to do research into this issue and find out why Trump rolled back all these ecology referendums and regulations. Well, it's not because he doesn't like the way the economy and the way the ecology is running. It's because they were counterproductive to so many things that it could actually get done. So, you know, Dan's a good guy. He's got a great head on his shoulders, and I'd really like to see him succeed as well.
Yeah. It's interesting. That was kind of the whole sort of origin of me doing this podcast. Is I'm kind of the same way. I don't trust anything that I hear or see. I need to dig a little bit deeper. And you know, unfortunately, in today's clickbait world, you know, you get a 10-second snippet, you get a tweet, whatever it is, and they think that that's the end all be all, and that's not even the tip of the iceberg. That's the tip of the iceberg, and it's just a shame. So, you know, other than or aside from interviewing really cool people, I try to promote that as much as I can, which is get yourself, learn both sides of the issue, learn as much as you can, and be skeptical of what you're being told.
I couldn't agree more. And you know that the book I brought up previously, WN62, written from a German's perspective, it was a hard read, but it really made me realize that, hey, you know, those guys are fighting for their fatherland just like we are, and they were given a job, and they're going to do it to the best of their ability, given the resources that they have. So, I mean, yeah, it's sometimes tough to look at the other side of the coin or to see from someone else's perspective, but I think it helps us grow as people and mentally. You need to do that so that if you want to make an argument against that, you need to realize where they're coming from.
Yep, and it's interesting that you say that, because a couple of months ago, my wife and I were visiting Spokane, Washington. We went into this small little co-op art gallery, and just so happened that the artist that was there and kind of manning the cash register that day was an old guy, just a really cool guy. We had a great conversation, and one of the things that he said to me that really resonated was, when you're talking to somebody, or when you're thinking about, you know, your position on whatever it is, every once in a while, take a step back and go, is there a chance that I could be wrong here? You know, check your ego and, you know, really analyze how you're looking at this, and are you correct? And if not, you know, maybe you might want to change something. But yeah, it's understanding both sides of the issue is huge in my book.
It's I think it's a listening skill that has to be developed, because if you're worried about your comeback or what you're about to say, nothing that the other person is saying is going to get through to you, right? And I like to think about, if before you argue with someone or before you come back with another point of view, kind of let your subconscious mind realize what the other person says, and you know, roll it over a couple of times. And sometimes the best way to do that is with sleep. You know, you go to sleep, and a lot of times you wake up and your problems are solved because your subconscious mind has taken 3 or 4 different tacks on what your point of view was, and you know, you've turned it over several times, not even realizing it, and you wake up and you've got a solution to it.
Yeah. The other thing I've been realizing as I'm watching the craziness that's going on in America is all of this shit that you're seeing is the fringes on both sides, right? So it's just such a small population of, whereas you put you put 10 people around a table with a pitcher of beer, they may have different opinions, but by the end of that pitcher, you're probably going to come to some level of consensus. You know, it just it seems to me that that's the vast majority out there, and yet we're being manipulated by the
1%.
Exactly. So anyway, frustrating to say the least. So you had mentioned kind of getting back into a couple of other things that you had mentioned to discuss here, and let's keep it on the military, especially in light of kind of how we're, race in America, victim segments of our population, et cetera, military being the great equalizer. Is that kind of how you see it as well? I mean, you throw 5 different people who look completely different from each other into a SEAL program, and they're gonna have to figure it out pretty quick, and they usually always do.
Right. You've got a huge diversity of people in the military, and just like you were talking about the 1%, 99% of the people in the military, they don't see black or white or brown. They see purple, they see the mission, and they see mission accomplishment. And it doesn't matter who the person is or what they look like that's next to you, but you both need your own set of skills to accomplish the mission. It's a commonality. But using the military as a social experiment that can be manipulated readily, I think is a wrong idea. There's a lot of different things that have been tried around the world that we think we can just recreate the wheel, and why do that? Women in the military, women in SOF, the roles of women in military and SOF, special operations, have been tried throughout history and in the world. So I think, my perspective on future operations was people have used the standards, or what are the physical standards for having women in special operations. Well, it's not only about physical standards, right? If you can find, I'm sure they're out there, you can find women who can get through BUDS training and can complete the physical aspect of it, yeah. But once they get to the teams, one woman in a group of 18 guys who are all alpha males, and you throw a lioness in there, what does that do to the dynamics of that group, right? It I mean, everyone is competitive anyway. That's why they're there. They're all type A guys. But you throw a female in there who's bound to be hard, bound to be physical. She made it through the program, but the dynamics are completely changed for that entire group, because now you're looking out for your buddy, but you're looking out for the female. That's in our DNA. And you're looking out for the female 3 times before you look out for your buddy on the left, right? And you just want to ensure that she's okay. And I don't care. That's the way we're raised. That's us as men. That's in our DNA. And just because the female can make it physically doesn't mean that she belongs in the same unit. And I say, great, take all those women who want to be in special operations, put them in one unit so they can operate independently, or you can pair them up as a 1 male, 1 female. They will have access to more places and more situations than you and I go somewhere. Everyone knows what we're doing there, right? I mean, you walk in, or I walk in with another spec ops guy. It's pretty hard for us to fly under the radar. But if I walk in with a female who happens to have the same training, or maybe even more training than I do, and she can gather and we can gather more intelligence in a given situation than 2 guys ever could.
So basically what you're saying is that it's the I guess the ratio is probably where but if it were to be 50-50, it probably is, and I would assume places like Israel, where they're, I don't know this, but I would assume they're pretty well integrated, or is that not the case?
No, Israeli Special Forces tried to integrate for 20 years. and it was as a social experiment, and it didn't work. So they took the females out of their special operations forces, and now they have the females in their own special operations forces where they're paired with 10 other females, and they go out and they do missions that they are capable of doing because of their gender. All right?
Interesting. Yeah.
But the dynamics of having that female in with 18 or even 50-50 ratio, you're changing you're changing the entire wiring within that circuit, right? So it no longer functions as and we're successful right now. Why are we changing that? Why are we throwing our resources into one female out of 2,000 who could make it into the program? And what does that do to the rest of the program? You know, while it's stray voltage to me, that could be better utilized in other places.
And do you know why they stopped in Israel? Were those some of the reasons why that it didn't work out?
Exactly. They tried it with the same standards. They weren't getting the numbers with the same standards, so they lowered the standards, physical standards, you know, because of just the mass of women doesn't allow them to pull a fully kitted soldier off of a line of battle or out of the fire zone with, you know, the entire weight mass is going to be 250, 300 pounds. It just doesn't work that way. So they had to take that particular training aspect out of the situation. And now they don't even look at someone's heavy drag time as a part of training. So, you know, I think there's a lot of viability in it, but you have to look at the application process. I'm not saying women can't make it. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be there. I'm saying look at the application once they do make it.
Is that a factor right now? I mean, is that what's happening in?
No, right now you're looking at physical standards, and that's driving the training. And my point of view is it's not just physical standards. You know, just because someone makes it through your program doesn't mean that they need to be in that program. I mean, you have guys who make it through the program that become team guys, and you have guys who make it through the SEAL program who are not SEALs, but they are special operators for a period of 4 years. Their why is not personal. It's not patriotic. They're there to check a box. So something in their resume, and you know, you see those guys, and it's certainly not the kind of person that I would want to deal with. And we now have a factor in Bud's training, and it deals with is this one particular person. It's a peer group monitoring, really. You know, can you get voted off the island if you're in a Bud's class? Because by your peers, yes, you can. And because you're making all the standards, but your peers know that you're not the team player. You know, they know what's going on behind closed doors when the instructor cadre is not there, when you're not being watched. Are you out helping your fellow candidates on the obstacle course? Are you doing things that are team oriented? Well, no, you're not. So there's an aspect of training now where it's peer review, and you can be dropped from training by peer review, which is it's crucial, and it's a new application, and I thoroughly endorse it.
Yeah, and you know, it's as I'm listening to you talk, you know, it kind of sounds like, or it seems to me, just eventually kind of things sort of catch up with the way society is moving. You know, talking about women in combat arms. You know, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, that was you know, unheard of, and now they're pretty well established throughout the combat arms other than the special operations. But the thing is that, you know, like you said, the special operations is such a tiny part of the overall picture. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays itself out over the next.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not taking anything away from females who are in the service. You know, I've read some battle stories, and I've seen some things myself that would you know, it would really impress anyone,
Yeah.
the way that they will put themselves on the line and try to do things that are, over and above what their field of duty should be. So I'm thoroughly impressed with them, but I think there's an application for each and every person and each and every gender. So I would just hope that we try to use those to the best of our ability and not try to put a round peg in a square hole. Yeah.
Love it. It's yeah. I mean, I think back. I don't even remember when that movie came out, but Demi Moore. That was what, 25 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a while, but people still talk about it, don't they?
Well, I mean, it's front and center in today's world, and so it needs to be addressed and needs to be talked about, and we'll see what happens. Like I said to you, who knows what's going to happen in 10 years from now?
Right on.
Yeah. So let's kind of bring it back to Iceland. So you got your 20, and we're just about running up on our timeline here. So you got your 20. They are full on training right now, getting ready. I mean, is there any question whether or not it's going to go because of COVID, or what's your mentality about that? You just going until
I'm planning as if it's going to go, and until someone tells me it's not, it's impossible, and that someone is high enough in the Icelandic government that they can actually make that determination. Yeah, I'm planning as it's going to go. I'm doing the logistics now. Everyone's going to be on a bike. We're going to have RVs as sag wagons. The cool thing is it's easy to plan because everyone's on an island and there's one road that goes around the island. I've got a lot of interest in it. I haven't opened the registration of it yet. I generally wait until we're about 6 months out. So January is probably the earliest I'll open registration for that.
Yeah.
And everyone is who has knowledge of it is preparing for the trip. So guys are out riding their bikes. If they're not bikers, they're buying their bikes. I've worked out a deal with a couple of factories to get us some really cool bikes. A couple of bike mechanics who are over there in Iceland. I try to use as many of the host nation people as possible.
Yeah.
So we're setting up hotels. We're setting up RV campgrounds. Like every other night, we'll be in a hotel. It's not going to be a rough it trip, but it'll be something that people can go on and have enough time to actually view the countryside that they're in. And we can make a couple of side trips and go on some glaciers and some thermal pools and stuff. It's not an entire beat down trip, but guys are getting ready for it. The people who have voiced their commitment, they're all solid and they're going to go.
Nice.
So I don't have my 20 until everyone puts in their money, has made their commitment, and game on.
Yeah, I hear you. You had mentioned something, and I wanted to just kind of touch on this real quick because it also reminded me of another organization that for about 10 years I participated in their annual the San Diego Triathlon Challenge with the Challenge Athletes Foundation.
Right.
And that group was great because when I first started with them or doing the triathlon in 2001, I basically did from 2001 to 2010, I think. Right around 06 or no, it's actually probably 04, 05. So Iraq and Afghanistan are in full-blown war mode. But they had a offshoot of the Challenge Athletes Foundation called Operation Rebound, which is the guys coming back with need of prosthetics, blown off legs, blown off arms, and the foundation. What they do is they raise money so that somebody who's injured like that can apply for a grant to buy like a workout wheelchair or a pair of running blades or whatever the case may be. And that's kind of something that's big in your mind is the idea of recreational therapy for injured vets. Is that part of the Epic charity, or is that something else that you're doing on the side?
Well, it's something that I try to incorporate into the Epic Charity Challenge. Um, I have several participants and friends who are adaptive athletes. And I try to include them on almost every event. And it's some really funny things that happened. We were on the Bataan Death March, and I had met an athlete, Matt Melancon, who is a professional snowboarder, double amputee below the knees bilaterally. And I had him on the Epic Charity Challenge, and we realized it was a very hot, humid environment, April in the Philippines. And, I think the lowest it ever got was about 92 degrees at 3 a.m. But his prosthetics were basically, they were cutting edge, so he had computer controlled microchip prosthetics.
Wow.
But the material that adheres those prosthetics to his stumps are still back in the 90s. I mean, they're using neoprene. And you and I both know what neoprene does in the hot weather, right? It just sweats. That's all it does. It doesn't breathe whatsoever. So about every 5 miles, and he'd have to pull over and he'd dump 2 or 3 cups of sweat out of his stumps, out of his prosthetics.
Yeah.
And then we ended up, I took a roll of rock tape and then triple bandaged him, wrapped him all the way around, and we put his prosthetics back on. But it just really brought to light the difference between and the prosthetics technology, and how the limbs themselves have come light years from where they were 10 years ago, but the material that binds those has not. So, I mean, there's still a lot of things that can be done, and I think putting people in different environments like that really bring those to light. I'm trying to get a team. I've got a team where we put in our application for the Eco Challenge Patagonia for next year, and part of that team is going to be challenge athletes, because mentally and physically they take the team to the next level. Yeah. in my mind. Yeah. And it's really cool by bringing some of those things to light, like that athlete now is working with several different fabric companies to develop new fabric to adhere those prosthetics to the stumps of adaptive athletes.
Yeah, no, that's I love it.
I kind of went down a rabbit hole with that one. Sorry about that.
That's all right. No, I mean, in 10 years from now, we're going to see people with like bionic hands, like the movies, the way things are going, the way technology is advancing. It's incredible.
Yeah, but you got to get those bionic hands to work underwater, right? And you got to make sure that the salt water doesn't corrode them. And if you're going to develop things like that, you have to look at how many different environments will this actually work in, because if it's so specialized that it only works in one particular environment or in one situation, then maybe you need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how many other people are going to put this thing through its paces, right?
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I tell you what, Lance, this was great, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been great meeting you. Great talking as well.
And I'd love to buy you a beer sometime. I run into you down in Encinitas.
Anytime. You got my number.
All right.
All right. So you can start riding your bike now, and then by next June, you'll be up there. I want you leading the pack, okay?
I definitely. So when, because I do, some of these things really caught my attention as would be amazing to do. Have you started thinking about 2022 yet, or are you waiting to get 2021 done? I mean.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got 2022, 2023. It's already, really? Yeah, it's bubbling already. There's a couple of hard things that I'm reaching way back, and Alexander the Great times. I'm thinking about his march over the Alps into Italy and to try to take Rome, and how far that would take and how long.
Hannibal crosses the Alps.
That's it.
That would be crazy.
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
You get a real appreciation for, doing it back in the 1200s.
Yeah, where are you going to get the elephants?
Well, I don't care about the elephants. This is all us, and it's all by hand, and we'll just do it by ourselves.
That would actually be an amazing evolution.
And Patton made a march and took his tank battalion with infantry 60 miles in 24 hours to relieve the siege of Bastogne. So in the middle of winter, so that was in December. That's something that I'm thinking about as well. We recreate that and really see what the suck factor was.
Yeah. Oh man. So one more time, it's epiccharitychallenge.com. Lance Cummings, founder. Sounds like some amazing adventures, and if you're interested, definitely check out that website.
If you got young candidates in the pipeline, softprepacademy.com is also there. It's got itineraries and videos and things like that, training pipeline.
Perfect. So just check out those websites, and that'll at least get you pointed in the right direction.
Cool. Thanks for the talk.
Hey, Lance, I appreciate it. Let me just finish off by saying, if you're in the military, police departments, fire departments, or first responders, if that's you out there, thank you very much for your service. Stay safe. Lance Cummings, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Take care, brother.
All right, guys, it's the Rain Man. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Rain Man's Take, observations on the world we live in. If you like the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow Rain Man's Take on Instagram at Rain Man's Take. Also, check out our website at www.rainmanstakepodcast.com and send your comments to rainmanstake@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for future podcasts, which will be coming out every Thursday at 5 p.m. West Coast time.